Well, good morning, afternoon, or evening. Welcome to the first lesson of the term. I'm Professor Rios, and this is specifically related to Chapter 1 in your textbook. So this video is almost entirely content specific, not administrative, although there's a little bit of administration at the very beginning. All right, so let's get going with the lesson. And we'll begin here, put it in presentation mode, and there you have it, Fall 2026. This should be familiar to you, the cover of the course guide and syllabus. Chapter 1, Geography of a Changing World. This is the cover of your e-text. Remember, an e-text is what you will be purchasing, not an actual book. This also grants you access not only to the e-text, but to the Pearson management of the homework and eventually the final exam. All Pearson-based homework is managed through Mastering Geography, and you can access it via classes after you have paired the two of them. You should see the welcome video for specifics on that. It is not a timed event, but there's a due date. All Google Earth-based homework is accessed through classes. These are not timed events, but there's also a due date. This date is on Thursday, this one's on Friday. And finally, weekly chapter quizzes are taken on classes through the Respondus Lockdown browser. This semester, there's a little bit more stringent Respondus measurements. And those are, again, taken via classes, and they are timed events. Anywhere between 15 and 20 minutes an event. So they're pretty quick. So these are not long-lasting events, so you need to be ready to answer questions quickly because, again, you only get between 15 and 20 minutes per quiz. The learning objectives. So that was the end of all the administration for this particular video. Now we're getting into the objectives, specifically dealing with the globalization, which is something that is ever-changing. It's different in 2026 than it was back during COVID in 2020 and different than 1995. So it is ever-changing, and it's an interesting concept because you're affected by it on a daily basis. And the other term there is hopefully to understand interconnectedness. And that is what makes geography, in my opinion, interesting, because you can think about many different things through a geographical prism and understand why A is connected to B, which is connected to C in any area of the world. Okay? So these are some of the concepts. You can look through these on your own. But first, a definition of geography. What, again, makes geography interesting is that it is both a natural and a social science. So natural, for example, climate change, social, population, ethnicity, culture. So you want to be able to examine spatial occurrences of things, distributions, interrelationships of people, and the environments that they occupy in order to better understand a particular region. And every region is different. Something that my old boss at West Point used to say is that places do matter, and you make geographical decisions all the time. You may be making one as soon as you graduate from PACE. For example, where do you want to work? Do you want to go somewhere because the job opportunity is amazing, even if the climate may suck? Are you willing to move somewhere where the climate is hotter or colder than you like, but that job that you are offered is so good that you put up with it? That's a geographical decision. Some people move to places because of work, because of climate, because of family issues. You want to be close to your parents. You want to be close to other family, even if you kind of want to be on your own. So places do indeed matter. This is how the world is broken down per your textbook. And frankly, I think the book did a really, really good job in breaking the earth into all these different regions. Let's take North America, for example. Even though everything in green you see in that image is North America is a very, very different place depending on where you are. You certainly wouldn't confuse the Northeast United States with Texas, and you wouldn't confuse the South, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee with, say, Idaho, Washington, Oregon. And even within Canada, a very, very conservative West and a very, very, very liberal East. You could say the same thing for the US. So there you're looking at politics. You can look at the climate, and it's very, very, very different. So that's just North America. You can apply this sort of level of dichotomy to many other parts of this map, whether it be Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, East Asia, and so on. Globalization. So this is something that will hit specifically the first week around, the idea of increasing interconnectedness. And this applies to both human and physical environments. Okay? Or the idea of a global culture. One of the things, in my opinion, and by the way, when I give my opinion, I will try to tell you that, and you're free to agree or disagree with it. It doesn't matter. I'm not trying to instill my viewpoint onto you. I'm just giving you my opinion. So I will tell you that when I do that. Global culture, it's one of the things America does probably better than anyone. Think about the idea of a shopping mall in China, that image that you see here. That is about the most American thing possible. And we've exported that to many parts of the world. And they may have taken it and sort of adapted it to their own specific region and culture. But shopping malls, that's an American invention as we know them sort of today. And so that's the idea of global culture, the idea of promoting Western values, traditional diets, the exchanging of different kinds of foods around the world. That is global cultural exchange. The idea of linguistic diversity, or where your stuff comes from. So you could take a quick minute and look around, not only what you're wearing, but what you're using, and realize that most of that stuff didn't come from anywhere near you. Think about your hoodie that you may love, or your Uggs, if you're a lady and wear those hideous looking things, or if you speak into an iPhone versus a Samsung Galaxy or a Google phone or anything else. Where did that come from? Where was it manufactured? If you wear Uggs, they came from more than likely Australia. And if you like certain hoodies, they may have been, it's not even so much made in China anymore. It could have been India, it could be Pakistan, it could be Cambodia, it could be Vietnam, it could be Bangladesh. So again, Nike shoes. People think of Nike and Oregon because that's where Nike is headquartered. But guess what? Those shoes are probably not made in Oregon. Think about Adidas, a German company. If you think about Puma, another German company. If you think about Under Armour or any of these other athletic brands, they may have been headquartered originally somewhere else, but the manufacturing and the creation of all that stuff that gets sold that you can order via Amazon or any of these other apps, it's sort of a global game, okay? There are advocates and there are critics, and I'll give you all, and there's like an in-between. So as always, I'm kind of in the middle. I think of myself, hopefully, as kind of pragmatic. There's a lot of good stuff about globalization, but there's a lot of really bad things out there about it. So many people are like, you're pro. It's inevitable. It promotes growth and development, and it will result in economic convergence. There are critics of it. It's not natural. It creates big, huge, scary disparities between the rich and the poor. Yeah, I could definitely buy that. So, is it unsustainable? Well, guess what? As of this year, 2026, it's still a thing, and it is not really going anywhere. So, Again, you may have your own opinions about this, and they could be just as right or as wrong as mine. So, judge it for yourself. Here's a few examples. Globalization and migration. Again, whether you're talking legal or illegal migration, these two are connected in ways most do not even realize. Okay? And illegal migration in the U.S. got a lot of play in the run-up to the 2024 election, and there was a ton of illegal migration into the U.S. But guess what? If you remove all the illegal migration, there was a ton of legal migration into the U.S. There are plenty of ways to migrate into this country that were not illegal. So, again, it's currently happening in Europe. It's currently happening in Spain. It's currently happening in Italy, in France, in Greece. And that becomes an EU problem. And it's probably going to shape a lot of their elections coming forward. So, again, stay tuned. Globalization and energy generation and usage, that's a big deal. And globalization in China, because China, like it or not, it's kind of the big player. I mean, obviously there are other big players, India, obviously the US, Europe, but, China is going to have a big say in what happens next. And so what does that mean to globalization in general? I don't know. But it will have some form of consequence. Here's an example of economic globalization, lithium mining. And this is, as of 2026, the top 9 countries that generate lithium ore. That would be O-R-E, the stuff you mine from the ground. Cell phones, tablets, laptops, and of course, electric vehicles. So this is a big deal because as of right now, and technology on this obviously changes, battery technology changes, how it's used, but think about the idea of how much ore, again, O-R-E, has to be extracted from the ground in order to generate just one, for example, electric vehicle battery. And ask yourself, is that a clean process? Is that a carbon neutral process? And is that an equitable process? Meaning, are the people doing the extracting getting paid well? Are they being treated well? Again, think about it. I would say and argue no, but it's not the panacea, the heaven of solutions that many people think when they think of, for example, electric vehicles. I have nothing against electric vehicles. If you like them, get one for each day of the week. But they're not the climate change solving solution many people would like them to be. So, in any event, moving on. Economic globalization, informal. This would be the drug trade. So whenever there is a demand, and there is a demand for drugs in the world, illegal drugs, an informal supply chain will form where you grow the stuff and where it gets delivered to. So that's a form of economic globalization, however informal. Geographic regions. There's regions that are formal. In this case, this would be the green, Silicon Valley, or functional. This would be the purple in this case, or vernacular. Vernacular would be the green, formal would be the orange, and functional is the purple. So functional is the idea of performing a specific function. In the case of this image here is the city of San Jose. So the city of San Jose has jurisdiction in anything that is purple. So it's their city limits, basically. And that's an actual boundary that is defined by roads or a river or whatever the case might be. In the case of vernacular region, so that is Silicon Valley, there's no place called Silicon Valley. There is an area known as Silicon Valley. And that includes places like Cupertino, where Apple is headquartered, or Palo Alto, where Stanford University is, or San Francisco. Notice how the green encompasses areas that are part of the formal region and the functional region. Okay? So it's sort of they blend into one another. And the formal region here, Santa Clara Valley, that is, a valley is defined by sort of a relatively flat area between mountain ranges. So here you have the Diablo Range to the east, and you have the coastal mountains to the west, and you have the Santa Clara Valley, which is a larger area encompassing many towns. So again, formal, functional, vernacular. Okay? Here's an example of geographic tools satellite data. So this is a Google Earth image of the California-Mexico border along the southern edge. So this would be what's referred to as the Imperial Valley. Notice how they've turned it into a great agricultural place. Why? Because they have siphoned off water, and here you can see this. It's like a little canal which diverge water from the Colorado River, and boom, you create an area that is exceptionally productive because it is sunny a lot, it's warm, and now you have water. Throw in a little bit of fertilizer and boom, you have a very productive area. Notice how it's productive in the US side and on the Mexican side. Interestingly enough, you can see the difference between countries by how they farm. In the US, we tend to do it either in circles or squares. In Mexico, as you can see, it's a little bit different. The patchwork is not uniform. Again, that's one of those cultural things. But satellite data allows you to really look at the world very, very differently because you can see how things change over time. The human-environment interaction, this is but one example. This happened to be in 2010 when a volcano blew up in Iceland, and it generated so much ash that it interrupted flight travel from the United States into Europe for weeks. You can imagine what the cost of that was. So look at the idea of connection between places, and this is as of October 2025. Social media usage. And if you will notice, not all of these are in the US. For example, WeChat and Douyin, and I may be totally mispronouncing these, are in places like Korea and China. WhatsApp is the most widely used social media app in the world. It is used extensively in Europe, much more so than in the US. Instagram used to be number 3. Facebook used to be number 1. Facebook has since dropped. TikTok is up there and rising. X is a very US specific platform. And a lot of these other ones are very specific to places that are outside of the United States. They're very sort of local. But it gives you a sense of the difference between, again, Instagram and WhatsApp are the two most popular by far. Facebook is rapidly losing ground, frankly. And then you have others that are rising like TikTok. X is sort of kind of stuck. Alrighty. The cultural landscape. And by the way, this is the basis for your first Google Earth homework. It is the visible material expression of human settlement onto the landscape. So for example, this one right here happens to be a rice paddy field, and I believe it is in the Philippines. Yeah, there it is. So basically the landscape is very hilly, and because it's hilly and you're supposed to grow rice in flat areas, they have taken the land, they have made it into terraces. And so each of those terraces now functions as a flat area. And so now you can grow rice in every single one of those. So that's an example of cultural landscape. Other cultural landscapes, for example, Dubai right now is home to the tallest building in the world. That would be the Burj Khalifa. It may not be the tallest building for long. There's one going up in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, which might be like 300 feet taller than this one. So, but for now, as of 2026, it is the tallest. And again, Dubai, in this case, reinvented itself significantly because their economy is shifting away from oil and gas. So they're becoming sort of like, I don't know, the Orlando of this area. It's entertainment, it's luxury living, it is gambling, those kinds of things. So it's a very interesting region of the world, and they have one of the biggest airports in the world because it's in a great place to go between Europe and Asia. So there you go. Cultural landscapes, religion. Religion may be one of the most important cultural landscapes in the world. Think about the idea of celebrating holidays. If you're Jewish, if you're Christian, if you're Muslim, if you are whatever religion you may be, you may not necessarily be a particularly strong adherent of that religion, but you may go home for the holidays and celebrate things that are essentially attached to religion. You know, think about Christmas holiday, and think about Easter, and think about Ramadan, and think about many other religions and their holidays. You may or may not celebrate it from a religious landscape. It might be more cultural from your perspective, but religion is still at the sort of like a subtext beneath all of that. Again, population, one of the human geographical sections that we'll address quite a bit, and that's the idea of the distribution of people in space. And again, this is, I think population is key to everything, simply because it has effects on the economy and resources and jobs and healthcare. Okay, so these are population pyramids. So this gives you a sense of you can break it. They're very easy graphics to understand. You have percentage of total population or numbers, and you have a male and a female side, and you break it up into 5-year cohorts. So here you have one that's rapidly growing, notice mostly young people. Here you have one that is slowly growing, the US, pretty even, looks like a tube. And then you have some places that are shrinking, Germany, Japan, Korea, where it's sort of like top heavy. And then you can think of population as a transition. So how does the population change over time? And so the DTM, demographic transition model, which is what this is, was initially applied to how Western Europe evolved over time. Europe evolved naturally, meaning there was no UN, there was no Doctors Without Borders, there was no like free vaccine program, there was none of that. So Europe's population evolved naturally. The bottom line here is no population on Earth, none, 0 countries are in stage 1. None. So you have countries that are in stage 2, 3, 4, and 5. Stage 2 is rapidly growing. High birth rate, low birth rate. High birth rate, low death rate. So the difference between the two is big, the population explodes. Stage 3 is the birth rate begins to decline, the death rate slows down, and your population still increases, but less rapidly. Stage 4, which is where the US is, the birth rate and death rate are pretty close to one another. And in stage 5, you have high mortality. That doesn't mean there's disease and illness and famine. It just means you're an old country. So you have more people dying that are being born. So you begin to shrink over time. And 3 places that I can think of immediately that come up to Germany, Japan, South Korea. You could probably add places like Italy, Spain, they're all rapidly approaching that stage of demographic transition. Migration, the movement of people. So migration can be voluntary, forced, and then there are reasons why you move in and out of places, right? So think about the slave trade back in the 1500s to the 1800s. Most of it came from what we called Western Equatorial Africa. And most of it went into South America, and most of that went into Brazil. Some of it went to the Caribbean, Central America, and the United States and Europe. But that was clearly a forced or involuntary migration. Of course, in the US, you also had the population of Native Americans outside of Florida into places and basically removed from Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee into present-day Oklahoma, which is why Oklahoma, as of right now, has the highest percentage of Native American blood in people's background. And you have the Seminole. People think of Seminole as like Florida State University. Well, guess what? There's a lot of Seminole background individuals in Florida, or Choctaw, or Chickasaw, which would be associated primarily with Mississippi and Alabama. So, again, the Trail of Tears. Again, forced migration. Settlement, the idea of urban versus rural. And most migration on Earth is from the countryside to cities. People seeking opportunity away from the either dying or very stagnant countryside. That is, by the way, less so in the United States, far less so in the United States than in many other parts of the world. For example, in places like Brazil, you have these places called favela, F-A-V-E-L-A-S, favela. And you find them in Sao Paulo, you find them in Rio. And that is, notice, this does not look organized or well planned compared to this. So it is an organically developed area where people just moved in. There may not be running water or any sanitary services as you think of them, but they have grown sort of attached to these parts of cities. We'll get into cultural diversity, the idea of exporting population outside like, for example, baseball. The cultural collisions. Think about the idea, who's the most popular baseball player in the United States? And that would be Shohei Ohtani, Japanese. He's definitely the most successful player in the last 5 years, easily. So again, part of the world champion Dodgers and all that stuff. So in Japan, baseball has become exceptionally popular. World languages, world religions play a big role. Think about the idea of language and religion. Usually they came to an area as a function of assimilation and colonialism. So why do you find, for example, look at Mexico and the U.S. Roman Catholic and suddenly Protestant. And you have a place like Texas where parts of Texas are very Roman Catholic, but once you get away from the border, it's not. And then you have, of course, Quebec, French background, France Catholic, Quebec Catholic. Did you get away from Quebec? Oh, less Catholic. So again, colonialism played a huge role in the distribution of not only world religions, but world languages. Again, here's a colonial imprint. In the United States, our imprint is English, Dutch, Spanish, French. Think about the idea of the Louisiana Purchase, right? 8 states, I believe, were basically bought from France including Louisiana, which retains a lot of French cultural sort of like leftovers, including their legal system, which is very different than any other state. Okay? So the colonial imprint, impossible to get away from it. And it drives many of the things that many countries currently express. I'll give you one very quick example. I had cadets from Cameroon. And those cadets, when I taught there, they did not speak each other's tribal language. The only language they had in common, French. So when they spoke to each other, they couldn't speak to each other in their native tribal language. They spoke to each other in French because that's what they defaulted to. Again, colonial imprint, can't get away from it. The geopolitical framework, Ukraine, I mean, this has been in the news, less in the news, more in the news again. Again, it's hard to keep up with it. But however, if you think about the Ukraine used to be part of the Soviet Union, which was Russia and a whole bunch of other states that have since gone independent. However, the further east you go in the Ukraine, the more Russian they identify as. Meaning they don't mind being part of Russia. The further west you go, the more European they identify as. So the more of a problem they have with Russia. So again, historical frameworks do matter in these geopolitical sort of like food fights, as it were. Again, social and economic development. So for example, the idea of gender inequality, the idea of the Human Development Index. So this is a ratio between 0 and 1. And the closer you are to 1, the more developed you are. So the United States rates at 9.92. But other places, like for example, Pakistan rates at 0.55. And it's like a little mathematical equation that comes up with a number between 0 and 1. No country is at 1, no country is at 0. It's everybody's... Just like there's no black or white, it's sort of shades of gray. That's what this basically implies. The economic development, again, one way to look at it, here you have a big broad map that shows you Madagascar as low. But even that, you can then take it and, you can take Madagascar and then examine it by region. So percentage of population living below the poverty line. So you take an area that's just generically defined as low, and then you break it up by province, by town, by area. Okay? Social development, health, and education. So for example, the idea of these non-governmental organizations like Doctors Without Borders or the UN Environmental Program or the World Health Organization, whether it's, vaccines or vitamin E or women in literacy, all these things make a difference in terms of the social development of a location. The last thing I want to leave you with is the idea of female-leaning versus male-leaning education. So anywhere where you see the blue is more male-leaning education. Anywhere where you see the red, it is more female-leaning education. And that kind of gives you a sense of how, in reality, you want to be gray. You want to be as close to light blue or light red as possible. I mean, it's impossible to have a perfect 50-50. And in reality, you kind of want to be 50-50, right? It's impossible to really get there exactly. So you kind of want to be here. And most countries in Europe are sort of slightly female-leaning. There's nothing really particularly deep red or darker red. The U.S. happens to be that. Argentina. And then you have the deep blues like Angola and Afghanistan and Iraq and Turkey and Yemen. So again, it gives you an inroad, a look into different areas of the world, even though this whole area here in your textbook is defined as sub-Saharan Africa, even within that area, you have a lot of variability. So that's hopefully what makes it interesting. You can understand and view the world through that prism. So that's kind of all I have for you. This is the first lesson again. So, stay tuned. I will update as many as I need to, but some may be older lessons that have been there for a bit. But I hope this course helps you to at least view the world through a different prism. And that prism is culture, the social, and the natural, because they make a really big difference in how that area develops. Remember the idea of culture. The definition of culture is the learned patterns of behavior of a particular people. So you're not born with culture, you learn it, you assimilate it over time. So that makes a big difference. Anyway, I hope you have a great term, and I look forward to interacting with you. Have a great one. Bye.